Comfortmaker manufactures appliances that homeowners have come to trust. Even a trustworthy appliance requires occasional maintenance or repair. However, if you're in need of Comfortmaker appliance repair from experienced professionals, your local appliance helper can help. Contactor. The furnace control board sends a low-voltage signal to the contactor. When the contactor receives the signal from the control board, it closes the circuit, sending voltage to the condensing unit components. If the contactor is defective, it will not provide voltage to the condensing unit. To determine if the contactor is at fault, use a multimeter to test the contactor for continuity. If the contactor does not have continuity, replace it. Dual run capacitor. If the dual run capacitor is defective, the fan motor might be noisy, overheat, or not run at all. To determine if the dual run capacitor has failed, inspect the capacitor. If the dual run capacitor is bulging or leaking, replace it. Incoming power problem. The central air condensing unit is energized with 240 volts of electricity. The electricity flows through a disconnect box to the compressor and condenser fan motor. The disconnect box enables the air conditioning unit to be turned off outside. The disconnect box includes a cartridge which may contain fuses. If the compressor and condenser fan motor do not run, the disconnect box fuses may have blown, or the circuit breaker that supplies power to the disconnect box may have tripped. To determine if the disconnect box fuses have blown, use a multimeter to test the fuses for continuity. If the disconnect box fuses do not have continuity, replace them. Capacitor. If the capacitor is defective, the fan motor might be noisy, overheat, or not run at all. To determine if the capacitor has failed, inspect the capacitor. If the capacitor is bulging or leaking, replace it. Condenser fan motor. To determine if the condenser motor is working, use a multimeter to test the incoming voltage to the motor. If the condenser fan motor is receiving the correct voltage but the motor still won't run, inspect the capacitor to ensure that it is not at fault. If the capacitor is not bulging or leaking, replace the condenser fan motor. Run capacitor. If the run capacitor is defective, the fan motor might be noisy, overheat, or not run at all. To determine if the run capacitor has failed, inspect the capacitor. If the run capacitor is bulging or leaking, replace it. Compressor. The compressor is a pump which compresses the refrigerant and circulates the refrigerant through the evaporator and condenser coils. If the compressor is not working, the central air conditioner won't cool. However, this isn't usually the case. Before replacing the compressor, first check all of the more commonly defective components. If all of the other components are working properly, use a multimeter to test the compressor for continuity. If there is an open circuit, the compressor is likely defective. If the compressor is defective, it must be replaced by a licensed